Hello to everyone who is joining us tonight. Welcome to the Max and Carlota premiere. I am Mary Bowen, the director and producer of this film, and this is my sister Faustina, who is the script writer and also acted out Carlota as well. How are you doing tonight, Faustina?
I'm great. I'm really excited to be here with you and everyone here tonight.
This is our first live event, and I'm looking forward to this opportunity to have a chance and exposure, and hopefully we can do more live events in the future. Let's start off the night with an itinerary. Do you have one over there?
Yes, I do. We'll be starting off the night with our mini conference at 6:15 Pacific Time. We have our guest speakers tonight, Father Joshua Curtis, Mr. Jim Morlino, and Mrs. Anne Carroll. Their speeches will be focused on strengthening a Catholic culture through heroes and wholesome entertainment. After the conference, the film will begin at 8 p.m.
And as Faustina said, the theme for tonight is strengthening a Catholic culture through heroes and wholesome entertainment. I like to think of movies as art, like any piece of music or a painting. G.K. Chesterton once explained in one of his Brown mystery novels that art was explained or described what was going on in the inside of the composer. So if a piece was distracting and confused or ugly, it kind of explained what was going on inside of the composer. And so movies have become this way, especially in modern time. Goodness and virtue are the stuff of which heroes are made. And that's why it's so important to reform ourselves to be more heroic so that we can portray beautiful art that gives glory to God.
Well, it looks like we're going to have a great conference tonight. I hope you all enjoy it. Don't forget that Max and Carlota is not our only movie. We also released Alice Ravenhurst back in 2018. It is available on our website for sale, and Max and Carlota is also available to pre-order by tonight, and we'll ship it on the 20th.
If you've already bought Eliza Ravenhurst or pre-ordered Max and Carlota but would like to show your continued support, we will be having a fundraiser all throughout this event. Our target amount is $2,000. So if you'd like to donate, please follow the link and go to our donate page on our website and do so. All the money that we raise here tonight will be shared with the Max and Carlota cast and will go to support future movies.
We're really happy to bring these products of wholesome entertainment to you, but we cannot do it without your monetary support.
Everyone over at San Geniso Entertainment would like to thank you for any amount you donate to our company. Every dollar counts and is put to a good cause, and we always have a new project on the line. And it's nothing more encouraging than receiving support from people like you.
Even if you don't donate, you can still visit us on our Facebook page or YouTube channel to view our videos, like, comment, or even just to say hi. We also have our free newsletter, which also contains updates and pictures.
Right. And we'll be having a question and answer session later during the live event. So please send any questions you have about the movie our way. We'd love to answer them for you.
There are a couple of sources that we use for making Max and Carlota. Would you like to share them with us tonight, Mary?
Yeah, so I first read about Maximilian von Habsburg in my 10th grade history course, which used a work by Anne Carroll, who will be speaking later tonight. It was called Christ in the Americas, and that section in the history just captured my imagination. And we were looking for a short movie to make anyway, and that just seemed like the perfect storyline. So we went through that, and we looked for other sources. We found a useful website on the internet called The Mexican Adventure, and it had lots of information about some side characters that weren't really contained in Anne Carroll's work that we used to kind of form the characters of General Mejia, General Maramon, and Colonel Lopez. It also had lots of useful information about some of the battles that we kind of helped to expand on in the movie.
Yeah, that was what made it really a great source in addition to Anne Carroll's work.
Yeah, Mrs. Carroll also sent us a chapter out of Dr. Warren Carroll's book, The Crisis of Christendom, from his 6th volume out of the History of Christendom, and we used that also in there.
Those were all very useful sources for us. I think that some of the lines that they said were actual quotes taken from each of those sources.
Yeah, they were.
Our first speaker tonight is Father Curtis. Father is a priest of the priestly fraternity of St. Peter, as well as our pastor. As with all priests, the good formation in the minds of the children of his parish is very important to him. He warns parents about the dangers of allowing their children to be exposed to bad entertainment. We're honored to have him talking with us tonight, but first we'll have a couple pictures of behind the scenes that we'd like to share with you. So enjoy, and please welcome Father Curtis.
My name is Father Joshua Curtis. I'm with the Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter, and I'm the pastor here at St. Stephen the First Martyr. And I'm very impressed, actually, with the production quality of this. It's very amazing. I saw Faustina earlier, and she had her hair all up like this, and I thought, okay, Faustina's doing something new with her hair. I didn't realize that she was going to actually dress up and be in character for this. So, yeah, just very, very impressive, and very happy to be here with all of you and to support the Catholic arts in this way. We're very, very excited to have Anne Carroll and other speakers join us later this evening. So we thank you for joining us. I wanted to just kick things off by sharing a few words about what it is to be an artist, what the vocation really of an artist is, and then to talk about really where we need to go in terms of looking for good art. And some of those I'd actually like to draw into real particulars, some real recommendations of things to look for, and then maybe to use those as your model and example of how you're looking for the sometimes entertainment, but things actually that can really enrich and empower us in the life of virtue. So I think it was St. Thomas Aquinas. I was looking for this quote, and as often happens, I couldn't find the quote, but I think it was St. Thomas Aquinas that said that the vocation of the artist is to make virtue attractive. And hopefully they didn't already mention that. But that's the vocation of an artist, is to make virtue attractive, to make the spiritual life something that is attractive and something that people would desire and long for. And when we see good art, we recognize that it's really pulling us to higher things. It's pulling us and making real to us and tangible to us, sometimes very transcendent realities. And not only just making those real to us, but making them desirable to us. I would probably add that another role of the artist is to make vice unattractive. And at times, especially in the 20th century, Catholic artists have had to rely more on this because the idea of virtue and the proposal of virtue has become so inimical to people that are raised in our very modernist education and formation and culture, that the very idea of virtue, it becomes almost reprehensible to people. And as soon as you begin to promote virtue or to show something that's virtue in any kind of explicit way, people just shut down, right? They don't want to hear about it. And so people have to be a little bit more clever. And sometimes that's by showing vice to be unattractive, and then perhaps just giving a little hint that there's something higher and something greater and something that's very good that's calling to people. Sometimes it has to be done in a way that's just not as obvious as it might have been done in the past. So this vocation of an artist, it attaches itself to every kind of genre of art, every kind of art. The artist really should be trying to do this, to make virtue attractive. It really is influential in music. It's something that we need to be very, very mindful of in music. And one of the great errors of our time is that people think that, well, as long as I go through the lyrics and there's no cuss words and there's no, explicit mentioning of very vicious or perverse acts, that it's fine. And that's not true. That's not true. And you don't even need to be formed by a Catholic education to understand that that's not true. Even the Greeks understood that very well. Back in ancient times, there were not necessarily various keys of music, but what correlate to that were various modes, and we see that in Gregorian chant to this day. And something's coming up here. Can I just minimize this?
Yeah. This is the mom was doing on the screen.
Okay. Thanks. So, even in the ancient world, it was understood that even beyond lyrics or anything like that, that there were certain aspects to music that could be dangerous. And so it was well understood, even in the Greeks, and certainly throughout all of the history of Christendom, that there are certain styles and modes of music that are generally inappropriate for people to listen to and can be even quite harmful. So, for example, when somebody is going into war, they don't play Gregorian chant behind them. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for it. They don't play Gregorian chant because what does Gregorian chant do? It actually tends to calm the passions, right? To make reason more active and to facilitate the higher faculties of the soul. Well, that's not what a general wants necessarily when people are marching into battle. And that's why when you march into battle, there's drums and there's loud trumpets, right? All of this kind of very rhythm-based, heavy music. And unfortunately, we've lost the sense of distinguishing music by its style and mode. And so now, many of us, we expose ourselves to that type of music that has its place under certain circumstances, but we're just drowning in it all the time. Every restaurant we go to, it's on, and then many of us, we get in the car and we turn it on, and then we get home and we turn it on, and we're in the airport and we've got our, AirPods. What do they call them now? Yeah, you got those little, things that stick in your ear, and it's just endless, and there's no silence, and all the music is of a type that is meant to stir up the lower passions and to put the lower passions almost into control. And then we wonder why we have so many problems trying to live the life of virtue. And it may be just that. I realized this was actually almost an experiment for me. I was a convert to the faith, and I spent about 2.5, 3 years working before I went to seminary, and I was at a seminary for 2 years, and there I found out about the Latin Mass and really just completely fell in love with the Latin Mass. And so I left that seminary and I joined the Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter, and I went to their seminary. But between those two periods, I had a summer where I wasn't attached to one seminary or the other. Suddenly I was almost in limbo. And rather than just sit around all summer, I went back. I got my old job working in IT. And a curious thing happened, because when I first got to the seminary, I took all that old music that I had grown up with and that had been an integral part of my former life, and I just threw it away. And I replaced it with classical music and Gregorian chant and all these kind of much higher and more edifying music. And I listened to it, and I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I learned quite a bit about it. It was a tremendous opportunity. Well, then, after those 2 years, I went back to my old job, and I was put in an office with someone, and he seeded Pandora, which is like a online music library, with this very kind of angsty, dark, very modern band. And that was, everything was based then on that. Everything was like following from that. So it was all music that was like that. And it was amazing to me how immediately I was able to recognize the effect that music was having on me. And only really because I hadn't been drowning in it for 2 years. So now suddenly, like kind of up in the fresh air and able to see the visible world again, when my head got pushed back under the water, I immediately recognized it. I immediately knew what was happening to me. And it was terrible, to listen to that for 8 hours. It was unbearable. And at every moment to know exactly how that was really moving the lower passions and contributing to feelings of anger and despair and depression. And when we're right in the middle of it, we feel that way. And then we actually, ironically, we seek that kind of music in order to find some consolation, some kind of sympathy with an artist that seems to be feeling the same way we are. But it creates this downward spiral where we feel down, and then we listen to music that purports to sympathize with us, and in fact it just drives us further and further down. And when we're right in the middle of it, we don't even realize it. We don't even understand what's happening to us. So music is certainly something where we need to be very, very careful and very balanced in our approach to music, and not afraid just to enjoy silence, to recover a real appreciation and love for silence. So I don't want to take too long, but that's the beginning of probably a much longer conversation on music. I'd like to go forward now into literature, uh, and I think I couldn't do better here than to just recognize that in literature there really is a need for a guide. So it's amazing the difference in impact that a work of literature can have on you when you have somebody, when you have access to somebody that has really studied it and really understands the depths of it and the connections sometimes between it and other works, sometimes the historical context, and how the artist is trying to respond to particular historical circumstances. And I couldn't do better here, although I'll have to give a caveat and a qualification, but I think I couldn't do better here than to really recommend the lectures that were given at something that was called the Roman Forum. And I don't know if this is still going on or not. Maybe Anne Carroll would know. She may have been somebody actually that was invited to attend something like the Roman Forum. But these were annual conferences that were held, I believe, in Italy, probably in Rome. And they had all sorts of huge names at them. So Michael Davies, before he died in 2004, he was one of the keynote speakers very often for the Roman Forum, and he spoke about history and really gave a lot of amazing talks on history. And Dr. Alice von Hildebrand gave a lot of talks on philosophy. Well, when it came to actually both music and literature, they had Dr. David Allen White come in and give talks, give these lectures. And he had all sorts of talks on Evelyn Waugh, on Dante, on Dostoevsky, on Goethe, on Milton, on Shakespeare, Cervantes, on T.S. Eliot, on the Song of Roland, on Homer. Um, and you would do well, I think, really, to go and look these up. They're available on a website called keepthefaith.org. It's the same organization that puts out the Latin Mass magazine that probably you're familiar with. And they're very, very inexpensive. They're about $1 or $1.50 per lecture. That's just to help the upkeep of the website. And they're worth their weight in gold, these lectures, particularly these lectures of Dr. David Allen White, can really open up for you the world of literature. And not just introduce you maybe to the particular works of Dostoevsky or to introduce you to the particular works of Evelyn Waugh, but can really form you into how to approach particular works of the great works, in fact, of literature. How to approach them, how to understand them, how to contextualize them, what to be looking for, how really to read them, and to be able to absorb the real value that they have within them. So I would certainly recommend those lectures. Now, I did say there's a qualification. And Dr. David Allen White, unfortunately, and this is not a personal attack on him, I don't know him, and I don't know all of his circumstances. He is a convert to the faith. He converted in 1979. And he was a long-time attender with the SSPX. And I think, as far as I understand, most recently has fallen in with something called the SSPX of Strict Observance, which is a splinter group even from the SSPX. So I don't know that his more recent stuff would be as balanced as the stuff that he was doing in the Roman Forum, which would have been probably in the late 90s and early 2000s. But certainly those older lectures I could, without qualification, really recommend. He's one of the best professors that I've ever heard speak on any topic, much less simply the topic of literature. He was a professor at I think the Naval Academy, and had, even though he's just talking about literature and not necessarily talking about Catholic literature, right? Talking about Dostoevsky, talking about a Milton or something like that. Obviously talking about a lot of Catholic works as well, but he had droves of converts, just many, many young men coming into the church, having attended his class, and there having found something beautiful, and then being moved and attracted to virtue, and then being pointed in the right direction of the Catholic faith. So I'd certainly recommend the lectures of Dr. White. Now, there's other things that he wouldn't even touch on, but that certainly would be good to read. Although, most of these are serious adult works, and so I would recommend parents first to read them and really see if they are something that is appropriate for the maturity level of the child. But some of the works that I often recommend are some of the books written by Sigrid Undset. So this was a Norwegian woman, and actually I think in the 30s or the early 40s she had to flee from Norway because she was so hated by the Nazis. And of course she was hated because she was very good at communicating truth. She herself was a convert, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend all of her works. But the ones that I've read, Kristin Lavransdatter, that's a trilogy. It follows a woman from birth until death in, I believe, 13th or 14th century Norway. And it's an incredible book. Very reminiscent of her style of Dostoevsky, her understanding of human nature and the way that it corresponds to grace and cooperates with grace and the way that it responds to suffering. It's incredible. It's just incredible. It's almost unmatched. Maybe Dostoevsky would be her equal. And so it's an incredible book. It's about a woman that falls very seriously in her early life. But again, that vice is shown to be very unattractive. And then, in spite of the fall, she has this encounter with grace and a redemption. And then a beautiful life of reparation. And it doesn't sound necessarily like it would be exciting, but it's an amazing trilogy. So highly recommend it. She wrote another one that's quite good. It's called The Master of Hessed Baikin. It's a 4-book series. And so like Kristin Lavransdatter, it follows someone from birth until death, but this would be a young man. He goes from birth all the way until death. Am I running out of time? I'm good. But this one is a tragedy. So it lacks that kind of necessarily that redemptive arc, although there are ancillary characters that embody that availability of redemption. But in The Master of Hessed Baikin, you see what happens to someone when, even though he has the best of intentions in the beginning, he refuses to cooperate with grace. And you see the darkening of his life throughout that 4-part series. And it's a beautiful work. It's just such a compelling work. So that would certainly be 2 works that Catholic parents, I think, should read and then introduce their children to them when they feel that it's an appropriate age for them. I think it may have been said, but I bears reaffirming, especially because I think just a few years ago there was like this crazy talk that went around on the internet against The Lord of the Rings. But The Lord of the Rings is a perfect example of a work that makes virtue attractive. And again, an example of something where it's helpful to have a guide. It's really helpful to have a guide. I think there was one of the modern philosophers wrote an interpretation of The Lord of the Rings, and I won't go into everything that he says, but he identifies actually the manifestation of providence in that series. That you have, I don't want to ruin the books for any of you who read them, although I hope you've read them. And you have in that actually a failure at the end. You have someone that in the first place is incredibly weak and yet goes forward to conquer the strongest of all enemies, right? So very much consistent with a Catholic worldview where when we're weak, we're strong, right? It's when we're weak that God's providence is made manifest in us. But at the end of the day, there's a failure. At the end of the day, there's a corruption. And yet, victory comes from that. And you can see there that Tolkien is telling you that a higher power, a true higher power, will bring good out of evil, will bring success out of failure. And so there's a beautiful allusion to providence. But there's so many other places in that book where virtue is really extolled, and done so in a way that, again, it's not precisely the same thing as a sermon. And there's a place for sermons. But this is something that is auxiliary and that helps us as we're doing spiritual reading, and as we're doing, and there's a place for this as an auxiliary aid to our spiritual reading and to listening to good sermons and to the practice of recollection and all these other things that contribute to our spiritual life. Beyond the Lord of the Rings, I would also certainly recommend the Silmarillion, one of the most beautiful works I've ever read. Probably actually my favorite from Tolkien, and one of my favorite books of all time, the Silmarillion. And there's parts in that will just even reduce you to tears almost, because they're so beautifully written. So definitely, I think, try to listen to these lectures from Dr. David Allen White, and I think that will give you a good basis then to really dive in to some of these classical works of literature that otherwise can be quite intimidating to us. So finally, I come to then what is probably most relevant to what's going on tonight, because tonight we have Max and Carlota, that we have the first public showing of Max and Carlota. And so I want to just spend a little bit of time talking about film. And this is probably one of the areas where we're most at danger, and more so now even than, certainly my parents' generation, but more so now for our children than it was for us that were growing up. When we were growing up, you had to go to a lot of effort to watch a movie. You had to leave the house, you had to go to Blockbuster, which doesn't even exist anymore. Then you had to browse around for a movie, and then you had to rent the movie, and then you had to get back in the car. And 9 times out of 10, when you went to your parents and said, let's rent a movie and get pizza, they would say, no, we're tired. But now, because of streaming, and we've got Netflix, and we've got Amazon Prime, and we've got all these various ways that, all of this media can just be kind of zoomed into our house, and so often just total filth even imported into our house, that rather than tiredness being something that holds us back from going out to pick up some of this stuff, it's actually something that motivates us for it, because now all you have to do is sit down on the couch and click a few buttons, and the next thing you know, you've got some kind of movie going on. So we need to be tremendously careful when it comes to the movies and television that we watch. Just tremendously careful. And I've given many sermons on this and talks to the youth group about it, that it's really a great error to not do due diligence in researching a movie, researching a television series before we ever sit down to watch it. Because the overwhelming majority of it these days is just filth. It's just total filth. If you want, you can turn this back on. It's up to you. It's just total filth. But nevertheless, there's some real gems out there as well. And I think it'd be a mistake to just totally write off the entirety of the film episode. Because again, some of these things, they can be something that really helps us, even in our interior life, even in our spiritual life. They can give us very high ideals to be reaching for. So there's a lot of movies that take very Catholic things as their material. A Man for All Seasons would be an example of that, one of my favorite movies. And something where you have really a beautiful portrayal of the life of a saint put before us, and something that really encourages us. Another great example that people may not be familiar with is a movie called I Confess, which is a movie by Alfred Hitchcock. And there too, you have You have an incredible story of a priest that is put under tremendous strain to break the seal of the confessional and stays strong throughout the entirety of it. And Hitchcock, of course, has many very good movies, but that would be one of the best in terms of really encouraging virtue. There's a modern producer, and he hasn't had a lot of success, but he's made 2 movies, and the 2 movies were very, very good. And I think we should encourage those kind of efforts. Efforts like many of our children are making on a small scale. We have this movie here that was put together by parishioners at St. Stephen's. In Lincoln, Nebraska, I remember when I was in seminary going to plays that were put on by the children, and they were very spectacular, very captivating plays put on in Lincoln, Nebraska. In Kansas City, where I was priorly, there was a play group by the children, and every year they would put together another play. And I think we should support that, and we should support it when it happens on a grander scale as well. So this man's actually, I think, he's Hispanic. I think he's from Mexico. His name is Jose Monteverde, and you might be familiar. About 14 years ago, a movie came out called Bella, and Bella is about this kind of star soccer player, and he's just on the verge of signing this, amazing contract, and he's about to have everything that the world can offer in life. And he's driving, and he's not paying attention because he's kind of exuberant from just all of the heady ideas of pleasure and fame that are coming his way. And a child runs out in front of his car, and he hits the child, and the child dies. And it just shatters him, absolutely shatters him. And so he gives up his soccer career, and he goes to work for just, a line order cook at his brother's restaurant. And somehow he encounters this woman, and she's contemplating doing something really, really bad in her life. Something that would be even more crushing than what he himself had been through. And he spends, I think, the whole day with her, kind of, very kind of cleverly trying to talk her out of this. And not just trying to talk her out of it, but then he takes her to his home and introduces her to his family. And she sees, what a joy a good family is. And again, it makes virtue attractive. It makes the good things in life attractive. So another good book, another good film, but again, something that parents might want to pre-screen before they show their children, because there's good literature deals with real things. Good art deals with real things, and sometimes we do have to be careful about the age at which we bring our children to knowledge of it. They made another movie a few years later called Little Boy, which I remember seeing and I remember enjoying. I don't remember a lot about it, but again, something that you might like to patronize. And then there's other movies where sometimes I really believe that sometimes the secular world kind of stumbles upon, almost accidentally, something that's of real value. And you can tell that they don't even realize when they've done it. They make something and it has tremendous success, and they can't understand why. And then they try to repeat the formula and they can't do it because they don't know what it is that actually made people want to see that. Or if they do know, that it's so inimical to all of their ideals that they're actually horrified by what they've done. And then they set out to kind of destroy what they first set up. So one of the best examples I can give for this, now again, this would be somewhere where I couldn't recommend without qualification. But nevertheless, it is something that I have recommended. And that's the short mini-series called Band of Brothers. Band of Brothers, who's not, as far as I know, put together by Catholics. But the central character of Band of Brothers is the man of virtue. And in the beginning, it seems, like he's too strict, he's too guarded, but more and more they show that no, there's a powerful uh, attraction here to living in this way. And slowly, his virtue, and it's very clear it's his virtue, wins over the men that are serving underneath him. And he becomes somebody that they follow without question. And it's not because of his bombastic personality, and it's not because of his charisma. It's because they realize that this is a man that they can count on at the end of the day. And they also, throughout that series, they make vice unattractive. So here you would not want to watch this series without something that filters it. So there's a lot of blasphemy, which you wouldn't certainly want to expose even yourself to, much less your children. So there's a lot of that, and then there's also there's a bad scene in it. So something like Vid Angel, if you're familiar with that, could be used to great effect to kind of clean that up. And yet, nevertheless, as the fathers of the church said, to pull the gold out of Egypt, right? To bring what's good out of that. And again, you can tell that the producers didn't understand why this was so popular. I mean, I go to a lot of homes, and you see that on the shelf like all the time. Band of Brothers. It's like, oh, I've seen that. And they didn't get it because they tried actually to reproduce it. They tried to make it again, and instead of being in the European theater, they made a miniseries about the Western theater, the Pacific theater of the war, Second World War, and it was a total flop. And it was the same production value, and it was probably the same kind of level of acting, although I don't know because I never even saw it. It just wasn't interesting to me. But it was just kind of a gore fest. They lost what they had stumbled upon in the first series. Or perhaps they never really had it. They never really identified it. So there are works like this. And it's something where I think Catholic families want to communicate with one another to find things like this, where they can be found. It's not something that we need to obsess about or consider like a real pressing need. But when we see things that are clean and that really present the life of virtue as something that is to be sought for and really give inspiration towards living that life of virtue, we should be eager, I think, to share that with one another. And I think what we're going to find, just as the classical works of literature have been the ones that have perdured through countless generations, when all of the dust is settled on this kind of mess of a culture that we live in, those things that endure, those things that people still want to watch, they're going to be the ones that really did embrace the true vocation of an artist. So I think I'll wrap up there. I'm afraid, actually I think I already talked for about 40 minutes, and I intended to talk for about 15. So I will leave you there and leave you in the very capable hands. I think it's Anne Carroll next.
She's next.
Anne Carroll's next. So I'll pass things off to our hosts again, and then my great honor then to give up the stage for the illustrious Anne Carroll. So God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Father. We all need to remember how important it is to seek out and support good entertainment. I am sure your remarks will assist parents and all careful Catholics to keep a good guard over what kind of entertainment they and their children watch and enjoy.
And don't forget, our fundraiser is still going.
How much have we made? $185. Thank you guys so much for donating.
Remember that if you're not watching this event live, you can always donate anytime. San Antonio Entertainment and its future projects will always benefit from your generous donation. And if you are not comfortable or PayPal's not easy to use for you, you can always contact us on our contact form on our website, and we can send you an address to send a check to if you'd like to do that way instead.
Yes, so just go ahead and contact us and we'll easily send you our address. Speaking next will be Mrs. Anne Carroll. Austin, would you like to mention how we got in contact with her?
Yeah, I'll start by telling you a little bit more about her. Mrs. Carroll and her husband, the late Dr. Warren Carroll, founded Seton School in 1975 and Christendom College in 1977. Both Dr. Carroll and Mrs. Carroll are historians and have dedicated many works to history, particularly Catholic history. Our mom went through Seton's homeschool program, so we've always had a very, what we called, Carroll view of history.
And we've made a couple shorts off of Dr. Warren Carroll's 1917 Red Banners, White Mantle, so check that out on our YouTube channel. We have the 6 deaths of Rasputin on there. And then coming soon will be the chapter we named after the Road to Judgment, which will be about the more peaceful deaths of Blessed Karl of Austria and Saints Jacinta and Francisco. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, so Christ and the Americas is the work of Anne Carroll's, from which we drew the story from Max and Carlota. I got in contact with her over email after completing our first script because we still had further questions about the story. She sent us a couple documents by her husband, Dr. Warren Carroll, which Mary already mentioned, and that helped with revising our script. She's helped a lot with the continuity story accuracy-wise. When the premiere plans began to get underway, we invited her to give a speech, and so here she is tonight, Skyping in from her home in Virginia, where I believe it's getting quite late, so we greatly appreciate her being here tonight. Her title is A New Springtime in the Church, Lessons from History. So without further ado, please welcome Mrs. Anne Carroll.
Well, good evening, and thank you for that introduction. I'm glad you mentioned my husband, Dr. Warren Carroll, because he's the one that taught me to write Catholic history. So, St. John Paul the Great referred to the Great Jubilee year of 2000 as an event of grace, and grace must bear fruit. What is the fruit the Holy Father hoped to see from this Jubilee year? The image which the Holy Father most commonly evoked was a new springtime. He spoke repeatedly of a new springtime in the church. A new springtime in the church? How can the Pope be serious? Look at the problems in the church. Shortages of vocations, Catholic politicians promoting abortion, Catholic colleges gone secular liberal, Catholics buying into the culture of death, and most currently, the shocking scandal of priests who were abusers and the bishops who covered up the abuse. But the Holy Father still told us to prepare for a new springtime. And he did have some connections to the Holy Spirit that the rest of us don't have. Perhaps we'd better listen. Now, in my day job, I'm a history teacher, and Catholic history can help us get some perspective. Let's look back over 2,000 years of Catholic history. Were there other dismal times in the history of the church? Yes, there were. What happened during and after them? Let's find out. The year is 357. It's the height of the Arian crisis. The Arians teach that Jesus Christ is not truly God, but just a kind of Superman. Believing that Jesus is not God changes the whole face of Christianity. No longer are we overawed by the thought of the creator of the universe, a tiny baby. No longer do we have God himself kneeling in a garden and begging for the chalice to be taken from him. No longer do we have God himself hanging from a cross in excruciating pain. No longer do we receive God himself in Holy Communion, entering into an intimate union. No, the Arian version of Christianity is very different from the true one. But in that year, 357, the Arians appeared to have triumphed. The dominant political figure in the world is the Roman emperor, and he's Arian. Orthodox bishops have been forced from their dioceses and replaced by Arians. The great champion of the divinity of Christ is Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, Egypt. The Arians have tried many times to discredit him, but his continued defense of orthodoxy, in spite of everything they tried, has infuriated him. They tried to arrest Athanasius. He barely escapes to the Egyptian desert and hides in the tombs. He has been replaced in his diocese by an Arian named George, who had made his fortune selling pork to the Roman army, which was just about his sole qualification to be bishop. George now has his own private army, which has been arresting, maiming, and killing faithful Christians. The Pope, Liberius, has been imprisoned and replaced by an anti-pope. Under torture, the Pope has signed an excommunication of Athanasius. The government is Arian, the bishops are Arian, the anti-pope is Arian. If Pope Liberius, from his place of imprisonment, had mumbled something about a new springtime in the church, who would have bothered to ask him what he meant? And yet, at the very same time, Athanasius in the desert is keeping in touch with the people of Alexandria, exhorting them to stand firm. He is writing his classic book on the Incarnation, which clearly and thoroughly defends the doctrine of the divinity of Christ. Liberius is steadfastly refusing to sign a heretical document, and the ordinary people are holding firm, as are faithful monks in the desert. And within the next 100 years, what do we see? The Arians are finally and decisively defeated. They never had the ordinary people on their side. Now they lose their power in government as well. Without the support of the emperor, Arian bishops cannot prevail. Orthodox bishops return to their dioceses. There is an explosion of monasteries in the desert. St. Augustine is converted. The Council of Ephesus proclaims that Mary is the Mother of God. St. Patrick goes to Ireland and converts that island, bringing into the church a race of people that for centuries will hold fast to the faith through some of the worst persecutions in history. And they will send countless missionaries back to the continent of Europe to convert the barbarians. In fact, it may well have been exactly 100 years from that dark year of 357 when Patrick held a synod of Irish bishops to draw up the initial laws governing the Irish church. If the shamrocks are growing, you know it's springtime. So that's one example of springtime arising in the most unlikely circumstances. Are there more? Let's move forward to the year 897. This is a black time in Europe. There is no strong governmental authority. The church building of St. John Lateran in Rome, which was actually the Pope's original home church, had just collapsed. The collapse of that church building is a symbol of the apparent collapse of the church at this time. Rome is torn by feuding factions. The strongest faction is the Spoleto family, one of whose members had earlier imprisoned a pope and looted Rome. The leaders of this family are the terrible Duchess Angeltrude and her son Lambert. The Duchess hated the preceding pope, Pope Formosus, and had raised up an anti-pope during Formosus's reign. The new pope is Stephen VII, who is afraid of her, as anyone in his right mind would be, and is willing to do anything she says. The Duchess wants to discredit everything Formosus had done. So, with Pope Stephen, the Vicar of Christ, presiding, she orchestrates the Synod of the Corpse. The decayed body of Pope Formosus is taken out of its tomb in St. Peter's. It is dressed in papal robes. It is propped upon a seat. It is charged with violations of church law. the case is heard. Formosus has nothing to say in his defense. Pope Stephen VII, the supreme head of the Holy Roman Catholic Church, pronounces the corpse guilty as charged. It is declared never to have been pope. Its robes are stripped off. The 3 fingers of its right hand, which had been raised for papal blessings, are cut off. The ravaged remnant is dragged to the nave of St. Peter's and eventually thrown into the Tiber River. Springtime? No sign of springtime in that scene from hell. And yet, at the very same time, King Alfred the Great in England is decisively defeating the pagan Danes trying to take over England. He establishes a Catholic kingdom in that island, building monasteries and churches, learning Latin so that he can translate sacred writings into the Saxon language. King Alfonso the Great is driving back the Muslims and reestablishing Catholic rule over much of Spain, as the Spanish people refused to surrender their faith even under militant Islamic rule. The conversion of the Slavic peoples of Southern and Eastern Europe, begun by St. Cyril and St. Methodius, is proceeding rapidly. And within the next 100 years, what do we see? The establishment of the Cluny Monastery in France by a man who wanted to make reparation for a murder he committed in his youth. This monastery began the reform of the Catholic Church throughout Europe. The Holy Roman Emperor is Otto the Great, who with his wife, Queen Adelaide, a saint, reestablishes order in Europe, defends the Pope, and makes possible the rebirth of Catholic civilization. The conversion of Russia, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Hungary, and Poland happened during this time. The glory of Christendom, known as the High Middle Ages, was just over the horizon as the year 1000 dawned. And it was exactly 100 years after that nightmare scene in Rome that King St. Stephen of Hungary solemnly placed all his realms under the protection of the Blessed Mother. And just about that same time, King St. Adalbert of Poland wrote the oldest Polish hymn to the Blessed Virgin Mary, putting into words the great Polish devotion to Our Lady. Have you noticed that when the Blessed Mother comes, she brings springtime with her? In Lourdes, France, in February, Bernadette waded in the river and the water was warm. In Guadalupe, Mexico, roses bloomed in December. In Fatima, Portugal, a torrential rainstorm was replaced by the warming rays of the sun as it spun in the sky. Wherever the Blessed Mother is, as she was in Hungary and Poland, there is springtime. A third example, 1534. The King of England is Henry VIII. Henry had once been a faithful Catholic. He had written a book called In Defense of the Seven Sacraments, defending the Catholic teachings on the sacraments against Martin Luther. The Pope was so impressed by the book that he gave Henry the title Defender of the Faith. At the time he wrote that book, he was happily married to his beautiful Spanish queen, Catherine of Aragon. But in 1534, Catherine is exiled to a drafty old castle in the north of England. Henry has turned against the Catholic Church, and instead of defending the faith, he is attacking it. What happened? Anne Boleyn happened. Henry rejected his wife and then rejected the church because he could not control his passions. So in that year, 1534, the English Parliament, under pressure from Henry, passed the Act of Supremacy, which officially declared Henry VIII to be head of the church in England, rejecting the Pope, who was now regarded as just another bishop. England was now officially in schism. The government would soon take over the monasteries, throwing out the monks. The Mass was prohibited. Catholics were martyred for simply refusing to accept Henry as head of the church. But it isn't only England that is suffering in the year 1534. Sweden and Denmark have also left the church, both countries becoming officially Lutheran. The great defender of the church, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, was beset on all sides. A league of Protestant princes was denying his authority, allied with the supposedly Catholic King of France against Charles. Pope Clement VII was refusing to call a reforming council, though Charles was begging him to do so. Militant Islam was on the march with a huge army in Hungary, on the borders of Catholic Europe. It looked as if there were going to be a very long winter. And yet, at the very same time, Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared in Mexico, and 9 million Indians would be converted in the next 17 years. Almost exactly the same number as the number of Catholics who left the church in England. St. Thomas More and St. John Fisher refused to take the oath of supremacy that would declare Henry head of the church. They will die rather than compromise with the truth. St. Ignatius of Loyola and 5 companions are pledging the rest of their lives to the service of God and His church. They will become known as the Society of Jesus, or Jesuits, one of the great religious orders. And within the next 100 years, what do we see? St. Teresa of Avila in Spain, reforming the Carmelite order and helping to save Spain from falling to Protestants. The conversion of all Latin America. The convening of the Council of Trent and its reform of the church and definition of Catholic dogmas. The defeat of the Muslims at Lepanto, so thoroughly that they never attacked by sea again. A defeat largely brought about by the praying of the Rosary by Catholics all over Europe. The Jesuit St. Francis Xavier would bring thousands into the church in India, Malaysia, and Japan. Missionaries would also go to China, the Philippines, and Vietnam. The building of St. Peter's, that beautiful basilica, would be completed. In fact, just 100 years after the schismatic act of supremacy, which defied the authority of the Pope, the great architect Bernini erected over the papal altar in St. Peter's the bronze canopy, which towers not only over the altar, but over the tomb of St. Peter, the rock upon whom Jesus Christ built his church. This magnificent church proclaims truly that the gates of hell will never prevail against the church. Springtime? I'd say we were in the summer. One final example. 1794. France is in the midst of the French Revolution. From July 14th, 1789, a day still celebrated as France's Independence Day, violence and terror had ruled the country. Hundreds had been killed in mob violence, and not just simple killing. Often, bodies were dismembered and heads placed on pikes, and people danced in the streets with those heads. King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette had been executed, both dying with grace and dignity. But grace and dignity were in very short supply in France. The murder of the king is considered the beginning of the Reign of Terror, January 1793, when Maximilien Robespierre held absolute power of life and death in France. It was illegal to worship God or go to Mass. Monastic vows were prohibited, convents and monasteries closed down, nuns and monks expelled and didn't to wear their habits. Even the calendar had been remade. They no longer counted time by the year of the Lord, but by the year of liberty, the overthrow of the king. The months had new names, and the week was now 10 days long. Why? To eliminate Sunday. The law of suspects had been passed, removing all defense for a person accused of a capital crime. And what might be a capital crime? Simply speaking critically of the revolution. The Catholic uprising in the Vendée region was viciously and brutally crushed. Men, women, and even children massacred. In Paris, prisoners are taken to the guillotine in daily batches in little carts pulled by horses or donkeys. The soil around the scaffold had become so saturated that the animals pulling the little carts, carrying the victims, are refusing to enter the killing grounds because of the smell of blood. There are thousands of people in the prisons with no apparent hope to be saved. It is illegal to be a Catholic. There has been no springtime in France since the revolution began 5 bloody years before. And yet, during that very same year, on July 17th, 16 prisoners in a batch of 40 catch the attention of onlookers who have become bored with the work of the guillotine. These particular prisoners are wearing brown robes and white mantles, religious habits, which have been illegal for years. Who are they? They are Carmelite nuns from the nearby town Compiègne. On Good Friday of 1792, they had been forbidden to wear their habits, but their prioress, Mother Teresa of St. Augustine, had told them to wear their habits under their secular clothes. They were expelled from their monastery, but they moved in small groups into friendly homes and kept up their religious life in secret. Shortly after their expulsion, Mother Teresa proposed that the sisters make an act of consecration, offering themselves to God as a sacrifice for an end to the terror. The sisters agreed and renewed their consecration daily. On June 22, 1794, the 16 Carmelites were arrested for still practicing their religious life, which of course was a capital crime. The Carmelites were told they would soon be going to Paris. Mother Teresa asked if the sisters might wash their secular dresses. The jailer agreed, but the only other clothes they had were their religious habits. Might they wear them temporarily while the other clothes were being washed? Oh yes, said their jailer. So their dresses were put into tubs to soak. But before the dresses could be washed and dried, the nuns were ordered into the carts for the trip to Paris. So with permission of their jailers, they would go to their deaths clothed as brides of Christ, wearing their religious habits. On July 16th, the feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, the greatest Carmelite feast day, the nuns were sentenced to death. The next day, they are loaded into a cart to be taken to the killing ground. They are in the carts, and they are singing. They arrive at the killing grounds, singing. As they climb down from the carts, singing, and stand at the foot of the guillotine, singing, the usually noisy crowd becomes unusually silent. The first to die will be the youngest, Sister Constance, who had not even made her final vows. She will make them now. She kneels before Mother Teresa and places her young hands in the older hands of her spiritual mother. She makes her final vows as a Carmelite. She kisses a tiny clay image of the Blessed Mother that Mother Teresa had kept hidden. Every good Carmelite must ask permission before she does anything not specified in the Carmelite rule. So Sister Constance says to Mother Teresa, "Permission to die, Mother?" Her mother replies, "Go, my child." Sister Constance climbs the steps, lies down on the plank with her arms outstretched in the form of a cross, exactly the position that a Carmelite takes when she prays before making her final vows. She is strapped to the plank is tipped, the neck stall locked in place, the blade falls. One by one, each sister kneels before Mother Teresa. She renews her vows, kisses the statue, asks permission to die. The women were radiant. An onlooker later said they looked as if they were going to their weddings. They were. For over a year, the sisters had offered themselves as a sacrifice to end the reign of terror. 10 days after their martyrdom, 1 week in the new calendar, the reign of terror ended with the overthrow and guillotining of Robespierre. And within 100 years, what do we see? There is a Catholic revival throughout Europe, led by France. We find St. Catherine Labouré, a sister of charity and peace, receiving the apparitions of Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal. St. John Vianney, patron saint of parish priests, is hearing confessions for 12 hours each day and wrestling with the devil each night. St. Bernadette receives the apparitions of Our Lady of Lourdes, and the miracles begin at the healing spring. Cardinal Lavigerie founds an order called the White Fathers, which will evangelize Africa. Many new missionary congregations are founded, including the Congregation of the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary, which would be the order of St. Damien of Molokai, who ministered to the lepers. From Uganda at the headwaters of the Nile to tiny Easter Island isolated in the Pacific, missionaries are bringing people into the church. But we can't have springtime without flowers. And among the French Carmelites, we find a beautiful little flower, Saint Therese of Lisieux. Exactly 100 years after the martyrdom of Mother Teresa of St. Augustine and her companions, Saint Therese of Lisieux was told to write her childhood memories. This manuscript would become the story of a soul, a spiritual classic. She would eventually be named a doctor of the church for her little way of spiritual childhood, which teaches us all how to be saints by living each moment of our lives in love of God and neighbor. She would spend her heaven scattering roses on earth, bringing springtime wherever they fall. And now we come to the first 2 decades of the 21st century, where we might not see much evidence of a new springtime. Shortages of vocations, Catholic politicians promoting abortion, Catholic colleges gone secular liberal, Catholics buying into the culture of death, the shocking scandal of priests who were abusers, and bishops who covered up the abuse. And yet, what is the and yet in 2020? The and yet is not found in criticism, complaints, and negativity. Our and yet is a homeschooling movement that grows exponentially. It is faithful Catholic colleges and schools. It is religious orders like the Dominican Order Mary Mother of the Eucharist that keeps putting up new buildings to make room for all the young ladies who want to enter. It is a pro-life movement that won't quit. And above and beyond all of this, our and yet is the young people who are so well represented by the filmmakers of Max and Carlota. St. John Paul was counting on young people to bring about the new springtime in the church in this new millennium. This filmmaking enterprise that we celebrate tonight is one example of what can be done by those who aren't afraid to try something new. There are many other projects out there waiting to be planned and carried out. Mission trips and ministry to the homeless and pro-life activism and knocking on doors to witness to your faith. That's just the beginning of the list. And what about those of us who aren't so young? Again, let's look at Catholic history. What sustained St. Athanasius, who, by the way, was in his 20s when it all started? The prayers of the people of Alexandria. Why was the Cluny Monastery founded? Because one man wanted to make reparation for his sins. Why was the Battle of Lepanto won? Because of all the rosaries that were said. Why did the Reign of Terror end? Because simple, unknown Carmelite nuns made a daily act of consecration, offering themselves as a sacrifice. Where will the church leaders and the saints of the 21st century get their strength? From the prayers and sacrifices and acts of reparation of all of us. Bottom line, history shows us that there is never a time in the church that is so dark that it won't get lighter. But all of us must do our part. Each of us can become an instrument of the Holy Spirit who burns with a very bright fire and whom the darkness cannot overcome. But our young people are in the front lines of the battle. Speaking of World Youth Day 2000 in Rome, St. John Paul said, "The young have shown themselves to be, for the church, a special gift of the Spirit of God." Young people, you are a gift that the Holy Spirit is giving to the church. If the new springtime is to come, it will come because of you and all the others like you, and the children you will raise, and their children. Believe that, live that, and win the world for Christ. Praise be Jesus Christ, now and forever. Thank you.
There we are.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you so much, Anne Carroll, for all your words. It was very timely especially in our own time.
Yeah,
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Good evening.
Thank you. Also, I really liked your parallel of how our the Blessed Virgin is always brings spring. I thought that was very true and nicely put. And just a reminder to everyone, our fundraiser is still going. As I said before, if you're not watching this live if you're not watching this live, you can still donate. San Genese will always benefit from your donation. Besides being shared with the cast for Max and Carlota, the proceeds will also go to supporting our future movies. We have plenty of ideas and novels that we would like to turn into movies to bring to you.
In fact, we have another historic movie well into pre-production. It's going to be called Grizzly Griselle. This will be a medieval Cinderella story, which has a beauty is from within theme. Bossy, can you give us an update on how that's coming?
It's looking good. Our proposal is looking very promising. Script is completed, and we're having it reviewed by our consultants. Costume and set budgeting is looking to be about $10,000. In the past, we've had pretty restricted camera angles due to poor sets. So the fundraisers like the one that we're having tonight really help to make better sets a reality so that we can have better cinematography. Mary and I have also started working at a butcher shop to get our own funds for movie making. We are getting really excited for this medieval film. You got the sneak peek ready?
Yeah, I did. Let's
show that.
I was a mere lad when I had the mishap to have the girl close to me when a barrel of gunpowder exploded and nigh tore her to pieces.
Oh! You evil little bit of baggage! Thus you yourself scarred and made hideous. Who's to find your husband now?
They say her face is like a cankered oak gall, or an apple cracked upon the ground among wasps.
You went ere nigh of being her death, marred her face for life, so that none other would wed her.
Griselle, you must win people by your kind deeds and good words. These are worth more than looks. Then they will think of you for what you are, not by how you look.
Ugly girl, send her away.
None would know what you traitor folk of Neville would do to a loyal house.
Traitors, it's you who's a traitor.
This place, since it falls to me and mine, is claimed for the king and queen.
Do you, Leonard Copeland, take this woman for your lawfully wedded wife.
For leither, for fair, till death do we part.
I wish to hide my face, and not to be the bane of his life.
Can we get some feedback on that? Were the voices delayed on the talking? Because if I'm going to play it one more time and maybe it will catch up with it and play it normal. So one more time with that one because I want it to be impressive.
I was a mere lad when I had the mishap to have the girl close to me when a barrel of gunpowder exploded and nigh tore to pieces.
Oh! You evil little bit of baggage! Thus you get yourself scarred and made hideous. Who's to find your husband now?
They say her face is like a cankered oak gall, or an apple cracked upon the ground among wasps.
You went ere nigh of being her death, marred her face for life, so that none other would wed her.
Grizel, you must win people by your kind deeds and good words. These are worth more than looks. Then they will think of you for what you are, not by how you look.
Ugly girl, send her away.
None would know what you traitor folk of Neville would do to a loyal house.
Traitors, it's you who's a traitor.
This place, since it falls to me and mine, is claimed for the king and queen.
Do you, Leonard Copeland, take this woman for your lawfully wedded wife?
For leither, for fair, till death do we part.
I wish to hide my face, and not to be the bane of his life.
Yeah. Well, it's our first live event, so I'm glad we got to try that. But it seems like the footage is playing slow, and then the voices are going normal pace, so it's kind of a couple frames ahead of it. But anyway, we're excited about filming that movie in the summer. In this movie, we hope to improve our props, sets, and costumes, as we already mentioned. Anything that money we make during this event will go to defraying the cost of making Grizzly Gazelle as true to period as possible.
And our final speaker for tonight will be Mr. Jim Morlino.
Mr. Morlino is also the well-known director of the War of the Vendée, which coincidentally, Anne Carroll mentioned the war of the rebellion in the Vendée. But if you haven't seen the movie, Jim Morlino made a full-length movie with a homeschool group down in Connecticut. So look into that. It's a great film. We got in contact with him for the first time back in 2014 after we watched his How to Make a Movie video. We asked for a suggestion on what camera beginner filmmakers should use. We also kind of kept in contact with him during the making of Outlaws of Ravenhurst. We chatted with him back and forth with that. During that, I had a lengthy phone call with him where we kind of ironed out some of the struggles we were having with filmmaking. And then he also came out to our premiere at Castle Nas last 2 Julys ago and talked at the premiere. So it was really nice to actually meet him in person. It felt like meeting a celebrity. It was great. Yeah, so he also helped mentor Max and Carlota, though, and kind of gave us suggestions and pointers, and he's been a really good movie friend as far as that goes. So after we came home from the premiere, the last premiere, we got home at like 11 o'clock that night, but we didn't go to bed. We stayed up, I think we went to bed like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And we just chatted with Jim and with any sort of advice with movie making. We just talked about movies all day long. So,
all night long.
all day and all night. So he's going to be doing his speech here, so please welcome Mr. Jim Morlino.
Good evening, everyone. And it's so great to be here, at least remotely. I wish I could be there in person. My name's Jim Morlino. I'm the director of Navi's Pictures, and I produced a couple of films that have had some kind of influence on the ladies who are being celebrated today. Mary and Faustina Bowen. Congratulations, by the way. So first of all, I wanted to say hello to everybody and say hello to all the Bowens, to Matt and Kathleen and the rest of your family, and especially to the newest Bowen, baby Bowen. I don't remember the baby's name, but welcome, and God is blessing you, and it's a wonderful thing. Congratulations. But especially to those, all of you present who participated in the making of this great movie. Thank you and congratulations for your hard work, and you're part of something that's very, very special, and you should be very, very proud of what you have accomplished through the direction of and because of the initiative of Mary and Faustina especially. So, ladies, I wanted to tell you. I wanted to thank you, number one, for asking me to participate. And like I said, I wish I could be there. But, 2020. Yeah. So the year 2020 will, I predict, be a year that you all will be telling your children about when they're your age. These are unprecedented times that we live in, and things that we have never thought we would see, and unfortunate circumstances. But what is our response as Catholics? Joy. Always joy. God has placed us in these times through His will, and we accept them, and we soldier on, and our reward will be great. So I think we should not wish that we lived in any other time. I'm guilty of that, though. I would have loved to have lived in the 14th century, or even in the 1940s, the golden age of Hollywood, the ascendancy of Catholic culture in this country. But that is not for me to decide. And God has placed all of us where we are. And you ladies and the rest of all of you young people are doing something to restore Catholic culture. And you should be very, very proud of yourselves. I'm very proud of you and edified that in some small way, something that I've done has perhaps inspired you, especially you two ladies. So to this work, this movie, congratulations. I've had a chance to watch the film before maybe some of you have, and I'm very, very happy with it. I think you're going to be very pleased. And I can't wait to see what else is coming from the Bowen girls, and very happy and flattered, or honored, I should say, to be sought out as an advisor. I was going to say a mentor, but that makes me nervous. I only know so much. I'm a trained monkey, is what I am. And I do what I can, and I have done the best I can. And it's been very inspiring to me as a filmmaker to see young people like Mary and Faustina and all of you roll up your sleeves and work really hard and utilize the gifts God has given you, your intellect, your imagination, those aspects of the soul that we share in a certain sense with God, right? That's where our divinity is, or our sharing in His divine life is especially through our souls, right? And so one thing about making art or making films that I find very exciting is the act of creation of a piece of art is, in a sense, a mirroring or an imitating or a participating in the creative aspect, the creative energy of God Himself, right? Now, the difference is God creates something from nothing. We don't do that. We can't do that. We're not God. But we do the next best thing, where we take many things, whether it's an idea, a story, words on a page, a costume, an attitude, a gesture, a camera, a microphone, words, music, dialogue, all these things combining together to make something new that wasn't there before. So in a sense, creating any piece of art is sharing in the divine creativity. And that's why it's intrinsically a good, meaning it needs no other justification except for the fact that it is. It is good. It is good for especially for Catholics to make art, right? But in particular, in these times we live, where we need heroes, we need the culture that I was talking about that was on the ascendancy. We had a Catholic, but a flawed Catholic president. We had a Catholic code of ethics and morality that was written for production of Hollywood films that reigned for 60 years and produced some of the best films Hollywood has ever made. So the Catholic mind, the Catholic Church had a great growing influence, I think, in this country. And it has since waned, right, as modernism has crept in. And so it's all the more important now in this day and age, especially in this very year, with all the forces arrayed against right reason, and justice, all the forces arrayed against equality and peace that are being hurled at us left and right, that we are having to endure, that I'm sure we will come out of. All the more important for young people like you to tell good stories about heroes, to celebrate virtue and truth and beauty. And that's what you ladies and all of the rest of you are doing. And that's why it's so inspiring to me, after all these years of me making my little films, to know that you girls, ladies, and the rest of you are inspired and are doing something and hope to do more. And so I encourage you. So congratulations to all of you. Enjoy the movie tonight. I wish I could be there. I can't wait to see what else you ladies have in store. And I just want to thank you again for seeking me out and asking me questions. So I look forward to providing whatever other answers I can in the future. God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morlino, for your encouraging words about our mission.
Yes, it always reawakens my passion and motivates me to want to make future movies.
Speaking of future movies, I'd like to remind everyone that our fundraiser is still on toward our goal of 2,000. We have raised $445. So thank you so much, everyone who has helped us further our business tonight.
Your donations help make our movies better in quality every time.
Now we can answer a few of the questions. Do we get any? I think there was one at least. It was an interesting one. Here we go.
How do you do the Gibson hairdo?
Okay, I'm going to tell them all about it. Are you ready? So, I've had to do quite a few rounds of practicing on this.
You gonna try?
No, I'm not going to take it out.
Okay.
I hope I ever get back in. So, I take a comb, and I take this crown of her hair out, and I put it in a bun on top. And then, so she's got all this, then the hair just like around her ears, around her neck, and around her top, just loose. And it's long. She's got long hair. It's like in here, you think?
Yeah.
And I take a comb, and I rat it all the way down to the bottom. So it's like this big ratted mess. And then I take it around my fingers, and I roll it all the way to the top, and I stick a bobby pin through the curl. It's like this little ratted curl. And I do it to the one in the front, 2 on the side, 2 around her ears, and 2 more in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And then I stretch it so it looks like it's one whole ring. And so until they touch each other, so you can kind of see there's a little gap there. But you just kind of make it so it all kind of touches itself. And then I spray it with hairspray, take the comb, and I smooth the front so you can't see. It's not as ratty. And then I take the loose hair in the back, put a little loose bun on top, and then she puts her torturous crown on top of all that.
Yeah, torturous crown. And the next question says, how did you learn? I think the hairdo.
How did we learn? Oh, the hairdo? We got it from, there's this nifty lady on YouTube.
Loopsy?
Loopsy? Yeah, her name's Loopsy. She does all kinds of, like, period-appropriate hairdo, makeup, and she has, like, some characters that she goes through. Like, she has, like, Elizabeth Bennet. Like, there's a whole video on how to look like her in the movie.
Do you remember what her actual program's called, though?
No.
Beauty Beacon?
Yes, Beauty Beacon.
Beauty Beacon.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, good job. Okay. This is one here.
What?
So someone also asked, how much did M&C cost? It's kind of the pet name for Max and Carlota. I think it cost about 5,000? 4 to 5?
I thought it was 34 or something.
Really? I can't remember. I thought it was 34 as production.
It was 34.
34? Okay.
Yeah, I just got that out when I was looking at it the other day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It was 34.
it was
Okay.
34.
Yeah, you go.
3,400, sorry. So 3,400.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the biggest challenge? Ooh, good one. What was the biggest challenge?
Well, we moved in the middle.
That was
So then we were about an hour away from our acting families, so we had to kind of split the burden of traveling to where our
was
shoot
hard.
locations were.
What is your dream? What's that going to say?
Movie program?
What's your dream movie program?
No,
Product, okay.
Oh, product. Oh, project.
Okay.
Fabulous.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
I would think
So
so.
if anybody is familiar with this book written by what's his name, Cardinal Nicholas Wiseman, Patrick Wiseman, Nicholas Patrick Wiseman, he wrote this pretty big book about the early church martyrs, and it's called Fabiola, or the Church of the Catacombs. So that is being made into a script. I think when the script was completed, it was a 3-hour epic movie.
Yeah.
So that's something we're kind of going to project a little bit into the future, but that's the dream that is going to be the
We're going to need some Panthers, so we'll
masterpiece.
see.
Yeah, there's
when
a
that
couple.
happens.
Yeah, there's some gruesome things in there.
Yeah, but also, it takes place in ancient Rome. Yeah. So we'd need a lot of elaborate sets for a Roman.
Yeah, Roman sets.
Yeah.
All right.
Feel. That's what I was trying to look for. Yeah.
So before we show the film, we're going to have an intermission while the score of Max and Carlota plays. After the intermission, we'll have one more chance to answer any questions, so please send them our way, and we would love to answer them. Please enjoy the music.
I felt that filming Max and Carlota was smoother than Outlaws of Ravenhurst.
Yeah, when we made Outlaws of Ravenhurst, it was like a lot of trial and error. By the time we started Max and Carlota, we had a pretty good idea what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah. I also think that a lot of the actors' moms had better faith than us. They were very generous, especially with their time and the food that they brought.
I remember there was this one time when everyone brought something to eat, and by the time our break came around, there was like a full buffet and like probably enough to serve a couple meals. But the shot location was the teeniest room we'd ever filmed in. Well, it wasn't like that small. It was that we had shoved the Christmas tree and the couch over in that one corner, so it made the room half the size it should have been. But there was nowhere to sit from eating, so we all sat on the floor and feasted. But it was so great, just because it was a feast.
Yeah,
and we were hungry. Yeah, it was so nice of all the moms.
Yeah, and I think our greatest improvement was the acting in this movie.
Yeah,
with the original score, which
yes.
we just played during our intermission.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with Bjorn's work. I couldn't have asked for it to have been better. He did a great job setting the tone through the music. Music tells people how to feel through movies, and he did a great job of eliciting all the right emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was very impressed with the way that he could use different themes for different characters. So Max has his theme, and then Carlota has her own theme. And then at the climax of the story, they blend into each other, but then they still are like distinct. You can definitely hear them, and it's awesome. But and then another improvement was our acting.
Right, everyone was more comfortable with each other.
Yeah. I also think that last time, since we showed a product, everyone was much more confident that it was going to turn out well and we weren't going to embarrass them. Mm-hmm. Of course, when you film with children, there's always those little hiccups. Like, I remember this one time, we were filming the Conservative Army marching into Quartaro, and all of our little rebels were in costume for a battle scene, and they were right behind them, and they were like whispering in their ears, talking to them. There's a clip of that in the blooper reel at the end, but we shot the whole scene, and then we were like, oh, there's kids back there, so then we reshot it. But I mean, that's how it is when you're one of the joys doing it with kids.
That reminds me of the time when we were showing Max's generosity, and he was getting a light from a conservative soldier's pipe. They're kind of showing his humility. And in the background, Adelaide crossed the street and then noticed that we were taking a picture. And so she turned around and came over, climbed up on the fence, and just smiled into the camera. And then we just kept rolling. And then she looked over at Michael and she goes, "Are you filming?" Yes, we're filming. Which was like, she wanted to be part of this picture.
We also had a smaller cast, which made it much more intimate. We had much more control, which was really good.
Yeah, and our costumes and our cinematography were other improvements.
Yes.
Especially with that last scene with the gimbal shot.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Was good. Hopefully you guys noticed it.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions?
Yeah. How long did it take to film Max and Carlota? It's a hard one because I think it took about a year and a half maybe. We it was a hard story because we revamped the script a couple times while we were filming it.
Yes.
So we had filmed it and then we had added some scenes and then we watched it a certain way, watched it another way, edited it different ways, and then noticed, oh, this is missing, we have to go film that. So it took about a year, and then we moved in the middle of it also. So that was a couple of months break away from it. So about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Someone also asked if the soundtrack will be available for purchase, and that makes me so happy because that means you guys liked it. So yeah, I love the soundtrack. It's great. I had been thinking of it, but somebody asking just kind of like made me decide, yes, we will do that. It will be available. I have right now kind of planned how releasing the movie, so I need to release the movie, and then the soundtrack will be available, though, in the future. What was our favorite part of the movie making process?
I like the actual shoot days. I just really feel like it's a time where we're all... Like, at other times, I'm making a script, and then Mary's editing, and no one else is a part of that. And I just feel like when you're with other people, it makes you feel like you're not as alone, and makes you also feel like there's a purpose, and that you and other people are having fun, not just your own family.
And I like the shoots, but I'm really kind of stressed out, and I can't really you're working with the people, and I feel like I can't really give them their time to focus on them. But I like editing, actually. I kind of like that I can take that footage that was just footage, and then I was able to cut it in a certain way that it produced a story. And then deciding how to cut it and making the choice to cut it here and to junk this, and this is garbage, and this is an excellent piece, even though it's 2 seconds long, it has to be in it. I like all that part.
And there were many times that we did that, like in Outlaws, Jonah throws the whip. And that was actually the camera that was taking sound, and we were watching that footage, and she was like, we have to have that clip with him actually dropping the whip and actually leaving his hand.
Yes.
And so that made it into the movie, and then it was actually Jonah again in Max Carlota. We shoot, each person gets we do the wide shot, and then each person gets their close shot. But during his close shot, I say, "No, sir, you are wrong," and he looks up like, "Oh my goodness, woman, you are annoying." But we saved that clip too, and that was like one of those 2-second clips that you just said that makes it, even though it's so short.
Yeah. What was your? What's that one? Where's your? Oh yeah, that's the last one.
Yeah.
Where did you get your costumes? Oh, costumes. Okay.
This one was from a secondhand store.
Yes, her costume was from a secondhand store.
This was a shawl that I had.
Yeah, and then the other things were from Amazon. The guys' costumes were just black shirts that I had sewn gold kind of around the neck, and then some of the gold on the shirt sleeves.
Oh, and there's the tops of
the
their
pretty
shirts.
glittery stuff on their shirts. That was all just a black shirt that we actually added things to. But so between Amazon and secondhand store, we kind of made the costumes with that one. I have to mention though that a friend in Washington sent us that red dress that Carlota wears during the bird watching scene. She generously let us use that, and so I have to thank Julia Fogacy if she's watching. Thank you so much for allowing us to use that dress in the movie. How did you find your composer? Bjorn and us go. Let me think. He's kind of a music guy. Like I think of music, and I think of things that. Think of him. He taught us a music course with him and his sister. He kind of taught us how to, not only read music, but how to like understand music and how to get the motions out of music.